Excellent. Then we are going into the panel debate. Now we want to discuss some of these questions. And by the way, I think we should open up for questions from the audience. So maybe Synne could have a microphone. So if you're eager, please raise your hands and we will also take questions from you. We will discuss several topics. First, we will have a short introduction by the panelists themselves. And then we will go on discussing a little bit more specific on technology. We will absolutely discuss how we can join forces in Norway to contribute into this technology and the advancement of the technology. And then I think we will wrap up with discussing a little bit about the future of language models. So that's the layout. Some of these panelists you know from before, but not all of them. In the panel, we have Samia here, who had an introduction. You know Anita, who also had an introduction. Then we have Sten from University of Oslo. We will soon go through and let you introduce yourself, Sten. We have Erik from Språkbanken, Nasjonalbiblioteket. And we have Eivind from Schibsted here. So let's start at you, Eivind, and you could present yourself, please.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm working, coordinating our work with academic institutions and research programs, but I have a past as a product developer, and I guess the light bulb moment for me was when AI was called machine learning. Back in 2014, we in Finn, the marketplace, the online marketplace in Norway, we released or we made it free to advertise. So the ad volume doubled overnight. And we wanted to make sure that all of these ads were not fraudulent and they had to be controlled by humans, and that took a lot of time. So some of my good colleagues introduced machine learning, said let's try machine learning with this, and overnight the waiting time for our customers dropped from like 50-60 minutes to almost nothing, and I realized then that we were onto something there. Lots of things have happened later. We're using AI in a lot of different capacities in Schibsted, but that was the start. Yeah. Anita.
My name is Anita, again. Well, you know what the company does and stuff like that already. I did not plan to get into AI in any way, shape, or form. It is not my background, nothing like that. We really genuinely just had a problem to solve. Starting in 2015, like how can we make science, like how can we put science into the hands of the people who really need it and want to act on it and solve problems with it? And looking at that problem for 10 minutes, we're like, yeah, we're going to need some powerful tools. And then we stumbled into the world of AI and haven't looked back since.
Samia.
Yes, I'm Samia. I'm a researcher at University of Bergen. So I'm half Algerian and half Norwegian. We speak 4 languages at home, so I've been in love with languages since I was a kid, and then I fell in love with computers. And then I found that there was a field, language technology, that combined both, and that's how I fell into it.
So I'm Erik. I work at Språkbanken, the language bank at the National Library. So to make language technology in Norwegian, you need data sets, and they're often somewhat expensive to make, and to make sure that there is good language technology for Norwegian, we have this language bank that shares data sets openly, so we can make technology out of them. My background is in linguistics, and yeah, I've worked at the language bank. I've also have a PhD in linguistics, and I've worked on the Google Assistant at some point too. So.
I'm Sten Ludvigsen. I'm working at University of Oslo, and I've been working with digital representation for quite some time. Prediction is very difficult. In '95, I stayed with the University of Peace program Carnegie Mellon. I met Herbert Simon, which was really a treat at that time. And none of the AI researchers at Carnegie Mellon or Pittsburgh could predict that Deep Blue was going to beat the chess masters 3 years later. So I was just laughing that actually Deep Blue from IBM could do that. So from 95 to 98, something happened. I think this is a really exciting field. My interest in this is really to understand the relationship between the human cognition and the artificial cognition, because I think that's where we need to take the human in the loop into consideration. So I will come back to that.
Very interesting. I have to add that chess was also what brought me maybe into AI from computational neuroscience. So it was a related field then, but that was AlphaZero way after using deep neural networks. But still, let's continue with the question to you, because it was just a couple of days ago, Ola Borten Moe was asked actually about ChatGPT in the parliament. And it was related to how academia and the parliament work with ChatGPT, and that's pretty much up to us now, how to deal with that. And how can ChatGPT be used in education?
I think that's a really interesting question, and it goes back to kind of the how do we understand human cognitive systems and the artificial kind of counterpart of that. In higher education, there's two distinct knowledge as issues. It's the kind of the general ones, but it's the domain-specific ones. And for students in higher education, the domain-specific one is really the most important one. So, for example, when people have this saying that they need to learn critical skills, those doesn't come out of nothing. So I think for higher education, we need to be a bit careful. I think we need to test it out empirically to see how this could actually work. And be very careful, I would say, in the empirical analysis of how students is able to connect the knowledge sources, as I would call them, that comes with ChatGPT and other artificial intelligence systems, and connect that to the domain-specific domains, because that's their, I would say, challenge. So I think people should relax about this. I think GPT is still sometimes a charming child, sometimes not a very charming child, but that's the case for every child. So if it's maturing the next 20 years, it's okay. If it does mature, we have a real problem. Yeah. So I think we should relax about all the dangers that's around the corner, but we should be careful about how we use it, and we should go into this empirically and not speculate too much.
Yeah, and Samia, you described a lot of these challenges in your talk. So how should we deal with this, the truthfulness, hallucinations, and so on?
So from the educational point of view, at least, I think that we cannot ban it, because some students will be using it anyways. I mean, those who want to cheat will cheat. And if it's not ChatGPT, it's something else. I think that maybe we should just rethink how, especially fields who use essays, or maybe even in computer science for coding, right? So instead of banning it, maybe just using it as a tool and just ask students to do some critical thinking about the output. At least for me in computer science, I know that we're not very good at critical thinking. At least me with my students. I'm not going to generalize for everybody. But I think like using it as a tool and forcing students to analyze the output and try to compare maybe different outputs and think critically about it can be actually a good way to use it.
Do you agree with this, Anita, with your background, the hallucination and how to deal with it in research?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting. A friend of mine had an idea that, like, if you have an essay task, make the student generate an essay with one of these engines, and then actually take a red pen and correct it, and also point out not just factually incorrect, but also where you can clearly see that this is made by a computer in the linguistic style, etc. So that's one thing. Another thing, which I think is interesting right now with all this hype, is that we're actually getting kind of potential clients and inbound leads that are like, yeah, I see you have this like summary function, and we've been using ChatGPT with great results, and how do I put it? I think there is a hype right now, and I think we're very shortly going to see, people who actually need to use this in their actual work or their actual exams are going to kind of quickly realize that, yes, there's potential, but like the name of the Minister of Research, yes. Right? It's like, I can't trust it, right? So I do think we're in a very hype period right now, but I also think it's gonna settle a little bit as people are actually trying to use it in their everyday lives and realizing that there are a lot of issues with it as well.
But actually, I was called in to give my opinion on examinations in higher education or in education in general. So what do we do with examinations now? I mean, some of these home exams, ChatGPT could pass, actually. What do we do? Sten?
To be a bit blunt, I think then we have very bad exams if they can do that. At least in my field, the ChatGPT wouldn't get more than a D. But I think we need to rethink that, because we need to think that it's a partner for thinking. And if we don't do that, we will not renew the exam system either. So I think that's why we need to fine-tune and look at this also empirically, because then we can see what this can offer. Because we will get here the same problem as we had before, and that's the kind of the black boxing problem. If you have very advanced representation in science, for example, of course, student can't really understand what's behind. And then we need to decide as educator and learning scientist to say, what do we need to open up at that box so the students actually understand what's going on? And it will be the same with this, that we need to kind of to use this and to discuss with the students what kind of model is this. So they need the language around what is the model, and they need the meta language to actually decide what they can trust and not trust of this. So that's why I say that we need to be careful about this, but we also need to test it out in a certain scale. And I mean, there is a research tradition that can look into this, so I'm not that worried about that, but we need some funding to do that.
So, yeah, Anita.
And one other perspective on this, if we go back, I mean, when I started university, right, we were told and even in videregående, we were told, like, you do not use Wikipedia as a source. Wikipedia is wrong. Wikipedia is bad, right? And then we've quickly learned to navigate a world where Wikipedia is actually a really good source of information, but we have to be a little bit critical, maybe around political issues that we look up on Wikipedia, as an example. But it's a really good tool. And now, a lot of these language models are actually trained on Wikipedia, which is an interesting double effect. But like, I do think that there's always like that with new tools, right? Wikipedia was really bad, and you were not allowed to even look at it when you were writing something. And that's changed. And I do think that we're in kind of the same situation now, but like, we have to be critical, we have to be realistic. And there's going to be a period, or like there were a period, where a lot of people are writing their home exams with Wikipedia, right? And they passed.
Yep. No, so I think we will have to change something, and this will, as you say, probably run some pilots, some testing. We will see what happens. It will change quite a lot, I think. But let's go on to maybe the most exciting topic, Norway. What should we do here together in Norway? And a lot of focus has been on the AI models, but of course data is essential to training this model. So Per-Erik, what about the sharing of data set? Such data sets often are also under copyright. Would there be some kind of a possibility to collaborate on this and opening up this in some way for the Norwegian community?
Yeah, I think so. So one way of getting data is scraping data from the web and text from the web. Well, you get all kinds of different data there. You get forums where people discuss, and it could easily lead to bias and to having data which is not factually with non-facts. So a different approach could be to use digitized texts, for example, from the National Library or from Schibsted or other institutions that are edited, that has editors from books, from newspapers, etc. And one way of doing it would be make those data sets available. But there are some problems with that, making those kinds of data available. One is copyright. So you can't just do that because people actually, they've written them and they have the copyright. Another problem is if you make huge data sets like that available, then potentially several different institutions could train the same kinds of models and maybe not make them freely available, which is a huge environmental impact. Training, as we saw earlier, training these models is very resource intensive. So one way of doing it would be that different institutions collaborate on making models, on standardized kinds of models, training them on these large data sets, and then making the models available, not the data sets. In that way, and as Pierre explained, it's often the fine-tuning is where you often get is what people are interested in. So you can fine-tune this model, train once, for different tasks, and that would be a different way of making available this large corpus of text. Yeah.
And this will obviously strengthen the Norwegian language and culture in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you see how could Schibsted be involved in such tasks?
We are already taking part in two SFIs, Centers for Research-Based Innovation. So we have contributed data sets to those, Norway and MediaFutures, which Samia is a part of. And on the whole, we really want to contribute to the greater good. We also see that there are some dilemmas there. From our point of view, you know, we're a commercial company. We've spent quite a lot of money generating those texts that are there. And we see that there's an ongoing debate about the relationship between creators and model makers. You know, that's still not resolved. Lots of legal issues, lots of issues about copyright, attribution, that sort of thing. So we're trying to follow the discussion and leaning into it and contribute in any way we can, but we also want to make sure we are taking care of our interests. And one more thing that we're seeing is that, which is totally true, training large language models seems to be, it is extremely resource intensive. And maybe we also should see beyond the borders of Norway for that, because we've seen the sort of base GPT-3 model has performed surprisingly well on Norwegian text when we tried it. So I think there's a debate that we need to carry on there to see which level is the right one for common foundational models.
If I understand you correctly, then it's at least possible to come together now and discuss this together and see how we could make Norwegian initiatives together on this topic. Anita, how could the SMBs contribute into this?
Excellent question. I mean, we always have the issue of accessing data, right? I mean, for us, we're lucky in that we deal with scientific research, and there is, approximately 50 million or so open access research papers. But then there's everything that's not open access, and can we just goddamn make everything open access already? The stuff that's already funded with our tax money should be available to all of us. Either if it's a human reading it or a machine reading it. End of rant. But no, I think there's a lot of startups in every field, not just in science and research. But there's a lot of startups, right, that will need data sets, that will be happy to collaborate on it, and that will generate business models of it, right? So there's also the kind of, I guess, like rethinking the business models of it, if there are openly shared, and say that, sure, you can leverage it, and then we take a cut of your revenues, right, as a low-risk way for a startup to get started, and that potentially would be a revenue source into the organizations that have collaborated on creating it, without necessarily Schibsted taking all ownership of every startup.
we do have questions from the audience, so maybe we should take one now. Is it related, I guess, to this topic, or maybe not? If not, I will go on with one last question, and then from the audience. Samia, because we hear now that we could maybe organize something in Norway. How do you have any plans? Give us the master plan on how to do it.
I don't have a plan. But if we want good models for Norwegian, we need data. And I agree that it maybe doesn't really make sense that we all create our own models, but it's maybe better that we all join forces and create one nice big model for Norwegian. And then we need data from you, data from you, data from everybody else. Everyone who has data, just give it to the National Library or University of Oslo, and they will train good models for us. There have been similar initiatives, like from different universities from different parts of the world have joined forces and created big models, and I think we can do the same in Norway.
Yes, one question from the audience then.
There was one before you, so we'll just do that before.
Hi, I'm Sabri from University of Oslo. My question is about the democracy in this field. People with access to big data and big computational power. Amount of data you can train and amount of parameters you can use depend on computational power as well. So are we seeing a challenge that some big companies going to dominate on this, and other fields and other smaller groups going to fall behind? How can we prevent, or should we prevent this?
Sabri, who wants? Yeah, Anita.
No, I mean, I think it comes back a little bit to the kind of quadrant that I was showing earlier. I think there are certain areas where, yeah, small players are entirely left behind. And I mean, we can't compete with Google on computational power, right? I mean, we're not even going to try. But there are niche areas, and it comes back to business models again, right? Most of these big players have very little interest in going into niche fields where they're not going to reach a mass market. So that's where you have an opportunity as a smaller player. Going up against a big player to compete on their turf is probably not a good idea at the moment. I know companies are doing it, like on translation services and things like that, but you probably want to select your niches. And there, I think there's plenty of room for small and mid-sized players.
Can I add just one comment? So Google and these big, like OpenAI, they don't really care about like Norwegian. I mean, why would they care about Norwegian? It's like side effect that it works for Norwegian because there is some data out there that is Norwegian, but their main goal is not to do something for Norwegian. That's our role, right? If we want something good, then we should do it. That's, I think, where we can actually have good impact.
Yeah, excellent point. Yeah, one more question from the audience.
Okay, let's try that. I'm Jon, Jon Orbakke. I have a master's in computer speech and language processing from 1993, so it's out of date. But I sort of, there are two threads that I hope we can explore a bit. One was sort of a factual question: who actually owns this stuff? I mean, somebody has created a huge piece of technology and place it on the internet for everyone to use, and they suddenly are in a very particular position on the planet. They control this particular source of information that we all use. So who is that? And what does that mean, that it's controlled by these people? And what happens to the stuff that I put in if I write something there like Arnoldo is my best friend and I'd like to write a birthday song for him? Will it remember that for all ages? I don't know. So maybe some of you guys can answer that question, and girls. And the second thing is the thread that runs between knowledge and tokens, language as surface tokens. And that's one thing that I'd like to explore. That's what I hope we'll learn in the deep dive later today. Is this just what somebody called a stochastic parrot? Or is it something more? And do levels of kind of semantic understanding emerge inside the networks? I don't regard, I mean, I'm blown away by the syntactical beauty of this machine. I really don't understand how it does that. But I think that the curve that peaks at 10 to the 24th power probably says something about that. Why is it so good? And my hunch would be that it remembers. It just remembers everything. That would be my hunch. It stops generalizing and just starts remembering. And so it can reproduce anything. That's why it does zero shot so well as well. So people that in the audience know much more about this than I do. I'm just philosophizing around these things. But I think it's early days to call this intelligence. I think we're looking at somebody paraphrasing Wikipedia. And that's the second question: how on earth did all that information get sucked into this machine that somebody, this technology that somebody controls, referring back to my first question.
Yep.
So these are just things that I was hoping that we could delve into today. Thank you.
Excellent points, and to condense them down, one, who owns it, and more generally, do we as academia have a responsibility to make a fully transparent tool which is available to the community? I guess that's an add-on from me. Who owns it, what goes into it, and the second one is about syntactic versus the meaning. Does it understand really the semantics, the meanings of this? So, anyone? Yeah, Sten.
To me, the big issue from a knowledge point of view is really how we can develop systems that combine the kind of what I will call the overgeneralized language models, because I think they actually overgeneralize. That's why they actually get it wrong. And to combine that with more propositional knowledge that actually we can say it's true and so on. And that's an obvious challenge, because then you dig into what you have called in another talk, the kind of the meaning problem. And that's a challenge. And I think that could be addressed, at least in the long term, in small niches. But I think for these overgeneralized models that we have sometimes see now, it's not really possible. So I really agree with you that we should go for the niche products that actually can combine the domain specificity and then see how far you can generalize that and not take the other model, which I think is out there now. It's somewhat impressive, but I think it will be disappointing after a while because it can't solve some of the basic issues.
So that was a partly answer at least to number 2 there, to combine larger language models with computational models, logic, other models that are more reasoning in a sense, right? Samia.
Yes. So who owns, I think you're referring to ChatGPT, right? So whatever you put into ChatGPT, they actually say it on their webpage that they are going to use it to retrain the model. That's what they've done in January already. They have updated the model with whatever people have put since November to January. Yes, it is a stochastic parrot. It's, basically try to look at word co-occurrences and try to find the best way of representing that. And third one, I don't remember what it was, but that was the 2 things I remembered.
Yeah. Any add-ons to that? If not, we can go on to, because we have already now touched up on it. What's the future? And combining these models is kind of maybe one of the futures. So what's the future language model? Per, Erik, what's your opinion from?
Yeah, so I'm actually working more with speech than text these days. And there's a similar development happening in speech recognition and speech processing in general that we've seen here with these large language models. And there's some quite exciting developments there. So I've used speech recognition since 2019, 2020, when we used it on the parliament data and the speech recognition system. When they said representanten, it said the representative. It said tanten, the aunt, and it was not really very useful. And today you can almost and it's very new. You can with Whisper, the new system from OpenAI, you can transcribe speech from videos, for example, have usable subtitles. And what have they done? Well, they have, instead of training their models on data sets that are specifically made for speech recognition, they have harvested videos with subtitles and been able to train speech recognition systems on that. And that has two very beneficial, that's beneficial in 2 ways. One is that you have access to lots of data. You don't need people like us making specific data sets for this, which will be small. You have access to lots of data because there are lots of subtitled videos. But also, subtitles are often write what you want to see. They write good text, not exactly what's said. And these and Whisper from OpenAI also transcribes in this like what you mean, not what you say, in a sense. So this is a really exciting development. I think very soon we will see systems out there that transcribe Norwegian really and make subtitles automatically really well.
So this is kind of the combination of the spoken language and the language models and as you say, transcription. And this also brings, this is about also fine-tuning, right? And OpenAI, they had a press release now saying that they will actually open to personalize ChatGPT. So you could bring kind of your data into it, your company's data into it, and make it kind of tailor-made to your need. So is that the future of larger language models? Should all of us have our own kind of language model in the future? Is that the field where it's going?
We have our own language.
Yeah, that I personalize my Siri, so it's
Yeah.
very personalized to me, and I know my family and my field or my business if I have a business or so.
That might be. So we are at the National Library, researchers at the National Library are fine-tuning Whisper to make it better for Norwegian and more robust. Yeah.
Any other takes on this? Is this one of the futures, that we will have a lot of competing fine-tuned language models and also business for that, selling those with different personalities, Sten?
When you talk about personalization for learning, not deep learning in a computer sense, that's really difficult. And computer scientists have been dreaming about this for the last 50 years. And I would say we have seen few successes so far. So that does mean it's not an interesting area. So if you're going into that, I think we need to do some kind of niche products and see if really that's possible. And some of us think that's possible, but we would really go into some domains. And it's done in physics and mathematics and some other areas that you can say you have a more fixed problem space. But to think about this in scale, I don't have the fantasy to do that yet. And that's because that's been really a struggle, because cognition is not easy to predict, and this learning process is not predictable either. And at the same time, at the system level, we actually have the same demands for all the students, just to pass the exams. So there is some kind of institutional logic built into that issue in education, but in businesses, of course, this could be different.
Anita?
Maybe I'm going to be boring and repeat myself, but like business model, at the end of the day, it all comes down to money, right? I mean, of course, there's technical challenges that we have to solve as well, but like if someone's going to pay enough for something, someone's going to solve it sooner or later. So I think it depends on like, and it's kind of like if we go back to right before the touch screens and the pen computing, like what was going to win, the pen computing or the touch screens, right? You can't really know that until people have it in their hands and use it and say, I don't want to pay for that, I want to pay for that. And so we don't really know until we start building them and start testing them and see what can we make money on. And unfortunately, that's the state of the world.
And you have quite a lot of money now, don't you?
A little bit, yes.
I think we are actually 5 minutes past schedule, but a final comment here also?
Yeah, just to build a little bit on the Whisper comment. There's enormously interesting things happening in the sort of speech-to-text and text-to-speech domain. And at VG, before Christmas, they took the Whisper model that was released openly and built it into an online service, which anyone can use who's a journalist. So far, I think they've saved, yesterday I checked, they've saved a little bit more than 2,000 working hours by transcribing, I think, 600 hours of audio data. And we're very excited to see what you guys are going to make when you're fine-tuning. It still doesn't get Schibsted right, for example. Or write it Schibsted or something.
Exactly.
But we're at the stage.
Learning.
Yes, we are at the stage now where we can get real material help from language models and using where appropriate and taking care not to, to take care of the toxicity and all of the bad possible side effects. We need to still think about that, but it's a very exciting and interesting future.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a perfect end, I think, of the kind of first session. So thank you to all panelists. We have just scratched the surface of this, of course. And we will have a more technical deep dive for those of you who will kind of dive more into the details after the break. It's allowed to leave if you want, but I can promise you it will be valuable to stay here also after the break. Please continue the discussions in the break. Try to put up this Norwegian kind of consortium to make and answer out all these questions. So please continue the discussions, and we will see you in, I guess, is it 11:15 we will start? Yeah, 11:15, be back here then. Thank you.